Hello everyone, welcome to a new video here. I wanted to kind of go over this graphic I just put out because I've gotten a bit of feedback from different people and I kind of think it's easier to fully explain some of the thought process behind this graphic. And some people also, I think, it's a little easier to be verbally told, or it's easier for people to process things through verbal explanation instead of just reading something. So I thought I would kind of come here and give just some more background, I guess, behind why I made the decisions I did and the placements I did. And all of this is, by the way, this is posted on the Justice League of Discord server. If you want to join, I'll leave a link for that in the description. I usually post graphics a little bit early, like no more than an hour early on here before I post it to like Reddit in the main server and in my league server. So if you want a little sneak peek on things, feel free to check out the server. We do a lot of cool stuff here. It's kind of quiet recently, but you know, there's a lot of useful information being spread here, and we have tons of knowledgeable people who will answer questions for you. So yeah. Anyways, background out of the way, I wanted to kind of get into this graphic here and kind of explain it a little bit more in depth. All right, so for starters here, this first page is just very straightforward. I mean, this shouldn't need much explanation, but it's just going to give you some information. I say it a lot. Purple one should always be your minimum if it's a character's first appearance, unless there's a handful of characters who need to go higher, which I will point out, and they should be pointed out in this graphic. These are the explanation of the tiers here. Highest value, pretty straightforward. It's just going to be the bleeds that will give you the most value, regardless of content, and regardless, this is, characters that are a little more time proof, I guess, and won't fall off. Fall off is a huge issue, which I'll talk about later on in the video with certain character. But fall off is definitely a thing, and it's there's a lot of these characters you'll notice if you've been around for a while. These characters are relatively old, at least usually 6 months old. So they've proven they can withstand the test of time, and they've kind of cemented themselves where they are. So yeah, that's going to be highest value. Then we move into good value, which are going to be they're still valuable champions. I would still recommend about like 85-90% of people summon on them, but there's always going to be, there's one or two reasons that holds them back from being in that absolute highest value tier. Next, we have situational value. This is going to be, units if you need things for specific content, or specific team comps if they're like needed for a specific team comp. They're gonna end up in the situational value tier where it's like you could, but it's probably not the smartest decision. But it is a step up from the tier below it, which is luxury builds, bleeds. These are going to be units that I feel like you really shouldn't be building unless you either A, are a whale with a ton of extra resources, or if of course, if you really like the character, you can always build them. I'm not going to, tell people not to build their favorite characters, but realistically, the average player who fully cares just about min maxing and getting maximum return of invest on their units here should probably be skipping these characters. And then obviously skips is pretty straightforward. Just don't summon on them. They're not useful anywhere. And they kind of just don't have a purpose being on your account. I really try not to put many characters in skips because I truly think this is a game where if you really, really, really like a character, especially a bleed character, you can make them work. I don't think there's a bleed character in this game where like there's no scenario ever where they work. Even all three characters in skips, they have use cases for sure. But those use cases are if you're a Kraken or a super whale who is 5-redding the character, getting your legacy pieces super startup. And I mean, I'll give the disclaimer, of course, because I guess it needs to be said. Sometimes build who you want, build who you think will be the most fun. I am not here to tell you don't invest in this character because he's stupid and you're stupid if you like him. No, it's just if you are somebody who wants to min max and you're somebody who wants to make sure you're getting value, this is what I think you should do. And of course, there's other opinions. You can get opinions from other content creators. But I'm just one fish in the sea, giving my opinion as someone who's been around for a long time. So yeah, long ramble out of the way. Let's get right into the highest value bleeds. All right, this is gonna be the biggest category, because honestly, there's just a lot here. There's a lot of characters here that are, I think one thing that really justified highest value for me is plug and play versatility, and how good are these units being just thrown into a comp. And that was part of why we're gonna get to probably the first of my quote unquote controversial takes, and it's that Constantine is arguably not in this tier. And a lot of that is going to come down to personal bias. My issue with Constantine here is every other character in this tier does really well being plugged into basically any comp. They're gonna provide something, whether it's in this case, these two cases, they're gonna provide insane damage, and they don't need support or don't need specific conditions to do insane damage. Um, Now, obviously, they would like supports and they would like specific, investments and transmutes and set bonuses, whatever. But they don't need it for the average player. And then the other, the supporters, quote unquote, Riddler, Zatanna, and these three, they can just be thrown wherever. There's no extreme condition they need to be met, or like they don't have a passive that it's like you have to trigger this or they're useless. They're just very versatile and they're very applicable to basically any comp you want to throw them in. Oh, and one thing I did forget to mention briefly, these little there's a few symbols on some characters. You can see here an up arrow means they're trending up, meaning they're more valuable than initially than they were previously. Trending down, obviously the opposite. This little star here means that they need their unique legacy piece, or they just won't perform at the highest possible level. Or there's there's a few characters where there's one or two scenarios where you don't need a legacy piece, but it's enough that I didn't feel like marking it down. And then there's a handful of assassins and firepower who fall under this weird little category of T-Sphere is just better to run. Like you're going to get more value out of investing in like a Riddler piece instead of starring up like your Lobo piece, who is one of the characters who has this little um, icon on his portrait. So I'll talk about that a little more when we get to them, not to get ahead of myself. But just so you know, look out for these. These will kind of tell you, and I'll also explain why the characters that have them do have that, and that's part of extra part of the video. Okay, so yeah, going into Riddler here. Riddler, just the best support in the game. He's insane. He debuffs, he shields, he punishes you for breaking shields by healing his allies. It is worth noting he is only a healer when he has his legacy piece, and that is part of why his legacy piece is required. Also, just because his legacy piece at 5 red may be just the strongest legacy piece in the game. He gets a disgusting amount of healing in our attack that turns into healing for him. And, I mean, he's just a really strong champion. On initial interpretation, I think we expected him to be more AMW dependent than he actually is. You can kind of just brute force throw him in anything. He's going to be insane. And the reason he's trending up is because of the release of Mr. Freeze, because now you have that Arkham Freeze with their Joker core that is just disgusting for stall comp purposes, for Death Metal Batman purposes, just really gross. So if there was any shadow of a doubt that he wasn't the most valuable bleed, that's changed with the introduction of Freeze. Sin and Nightwing are pretty straightforward. They're both just the strongest DPS in their category, and they don't require specific teams, as mentioned earlier, to do the damage that they are able to. So I don't need to talk about them a ton because they're pretty straightforward. Zatanna is here because she's the best universal support in the game, or just universal buffer in the game. She's basically needed to run alongside Khan. She's very strong for any damage dealer in Combat Cycle. One of the best just plug-in supports for Combat Cycle for sure. So just also a good Deathstroke counter with her clone summons. So just a lot of reasons to be pulling for her. She's very, very strong and will pretty much help anyone out. Moving on to Swamp Thing here, similar-ish reason to Zatanna, where he's very strong in JLD, but you can also just kind of throw him wherever. He gets energy drain just in base kit, and then when you get his legacy piece, he also has attack and crit rate debuff, so just an extra neuter to assassins that want to start a fight, just get a free kill, like Deathstroke and Raish, for starters as two prime examples. Now I know for a while we were kind of like, oh, you have to use Antler Crown, you have to use Antler Crown. Problem with Antler Crown, which is his unique legacy piece, is it's not really worth taking over 5 white if you're a free-to-play or like a light spender, but also like a purple star or higher Gabriel Horn will just outperform a very low star Antler Crown. So it's kind of a trade off where it's like, if you want to use Antler Crown, you should probably be taking it higher, but it's also like not super worth to take higher. So that's the only oddity with Swamp Thing really, is just if you have a high star Gabriel Horn, it's gonna probably be better than a very low star Antler Crown, but it's not really worth for free to plays to push Antler Crown. So he's in like a weird limbo spot with legacy pieces where I think either is fine, and they're both good options. Okay, moving on to Starfire. She is just the best healer in the game. That's at the current moment in time, that's undisputed. Undisputed. She is fantastic. Plug and play, great for stalling with her damage reduction, and she will struggle to kind of heal assassins. Like, I think one thing I myself need to stop kind of just defaulting to is say, oh, you have Nightwing, get Starfire, because with new Batgirl, I think new Batgirl is honestly just a straight out better support for Nightwing purposes, because Starfire isn't going to consistently hit Nightwing in the back lane, so if you throw in the front lane, she can do okay, but she can't really tank at low stars. There's no point sending your best healer into the front line to just die, just the off chance she gets one ult off to heal Nightwing. So I'm kind of shifting a little bit of how I recommend Starfire, and that was one part of why I consider her trending down, quote unquote, is this kind of shift towards recommending Batgirl over Starfire for Nightwing purposes. But the other reason for that trending down is just Mythic plus Green Lantern, because Mythic plus Green Lantern is going to challenge her title for best healer in the game. Now, I think they're both going to just, I think, of course, it's hard to tell without Green Lantern being available everywhere, but what it seems like to me is that Starfire will be the best for long-term fights. So stuff like stall comps, stuff like Arkham, stuff like JLD. She's gonna do better in these teams that want to stay alive longer to ramp up. But if you have a team like LOD or like I guess Batfam, I don't know, a team that is more built around ult quick, kill quick, or you lose, you're gonna want Green Lantern because he's gonna get that just kind of instant full team heal. And he's very good at going quick, and you're going to get a much more, it's like instant gratification versus sprint versus marathon, Green Lantern is your sprint healer, he's going to give you all the healing right up front, and then his value is going to kind of taper off for a little bit until he gets another ult, then it's like, boom, big value. Starfire is like little value stacks on top, medium value stacks on top, high value, kind of like she needs to ramp up a little bit with the damage reduction stacks, with the attack stacks that she's giving. Green Lantern, all of his value is like up front and then in big bursts. So that's the difference between them, and I think Green Lantern just existing and there being another Mythic Plus healer, because that's in air quotes because Riddler is a healer with his legacy piece, but a character built around being a healer. Starfire was the undisputed best character, then Riddler came around who could also heal, and now Green Lantern's coming around who is also healing at a Mythic Plus stat level. So she has a bit of competition now, so she's going to kind of trend down. And also, again, as I mentioned briefly, the whole Nightwing Starfire versus Batgirl thing. I think Starfire is still a very strong champion, don't get me wrong, but I think my ability to just flat out recommend her is dropping a tiny bit. Hippo, pretty straightforward. She's, I feel like most people by now know Hippo is just Hippo. Very, very strong protector. One of the best units at keeping your team alive. Probably second best after Riddler. Very strong anti-LOD purposes. Very good Super Fam 5th. Very good LOD 5th. Just works very well being plugged into random teams. She can, even be plugged into Nightwing comps and hit Nightwing consistently. So, very good protector. Probably the best character at keeping you alive. I don't need to talk too much about her. And then moving on to Constantine here, this is one of the controversial takes for sure. My biggest issue with Khan is when you compare him to everybody else in this category, Constantine essentially needs to be run with 3 JLD. If you're not running him alongside Swamp and Zatanna, he's going to struggle in late game PvP to find value. And if you run him without Zatanna, you are almost certainly not going to be punching up consistently with him, from what I've seen. I just feel he has kind of lost that plug and play ability in a sense, where it's like every other character on this team, if you have an empty slot and already 4 other characters put in, I'm picking every single one of the. I could pick any of these characters if I had 4 out of 5 characters on a team and I had 1 empty spot. I'm picking any one of these characters before I pick Constantine. That's my rationale behind moving him down. I think some people would disagree about how he becomes harder to use in late game PvP. I'd probably agree that was probably just kind of wording, being too harsh when I was initially making this graphic, because he's definitely still a top tier DPS. I think he like kind of struggles to hold on to top 5, because these 2 plus Death Metal Batman, just like there's a gap, like it's Death Metal Batman, Sid, Nightwing. Well, it's Death Metal Batman gap, Sid, Nightwing gap, Constantine. That's how the DPS are in my brain. So that's the reason behind Khan potentially moving down. I don't think I'm gonna end up moving him down. Honestly, if I make another graphic like this, hopefully Mythic plus Green Lantern will come down, and then I would move Starfire down, if anything. But we'll see. Oh, and he doesn't require his legacy piece, because you can also use Poison Ivy Dart, obviously. Similar with Sin, and Nightwing can also use T-Spheres, but, you probably should invest in all 3. And if you want to use Khan late game, like towards the end game, you definitely need to get his legacy piece really high. But that's the same for, I think, any DPS in this category, is you should be essentially building your account around one of these 3 DPS, and you should be investing in their legacy pieces, for sure. So that's kind of my opinion on my highest value tier. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I don't expect to see a ton of changes next month, but we'll see. Sin and Nightwing are pretty straightforward. They're both just the strongest DPS in their category, and they don't require specific teams, as mentioned earlier, to do the damage that they are able to. So I don't need to talk about them a ton, because they're pretty straightforward. Zatanna is here because she's the best universal support in the game, or, just universal buffer in the game. She's basically needed to run alongside Khan. She's very strong for any damage dealer in Combat Cycle. One of the best just plug-in supports for Combat Cycle, for sure. So also a good Deathstroke counter with her clone summons. So just a lot of reasons to be pulling for her. She's very, very strong and will pretty much help anyone out. Moving on to Swamp Thing here, similar-ish reason to Zatanna, where he's very strong in JLD, but you can also just kind of throw him wherever. He gets energy drain just in base kit, and then when you get his legacy piece, he also has attack and crit rate debuff, so just an extra neuter to assassins that want to start a fight, just get a free kill, like Deathstroke and Raish, for, starters, as 2 prime examples. Now, I know for a while we were kind of like, oh, you have to use Antler Crown, Problem with Antler Crown, which is his unique legacy piece, is it's not really worth taking over 5 white if you're a free-to-play or like a light spender, but also like a purple star or higher Gabriel Horn will just outperform a very low star Antler Crown. So it's kind of a trade-off where it's like, if you want to use Antler Crown, you should probably be taking it higher, but it's also like not super worth to take higher. So that's the only oddity with Swamp Thing, really, is just if you have a high star Gabriel Horn, it's gonna probably be better than a very low star Antler Crown, but it's not really worth for free-to-plays to push Antler Crown. So he's in like a weird limbo spot with legacy pieces, where I think either is fine. Okay, moving on to Starfire. She is just the best healer in the game. That's, at the current moment in time, that's undisputed. She is fantastic. Plug and play, great for stalling with her damage reduction, and, she will struggle to kind of heal assassins. Like, I think one thing I, myself, need to stop kind of just defaulting to is say, oh, you have Nightwing, get Starfire, because with new Batgirl, I think new Batgirl is honestly just a straight-out better support for Nightwing purposes, because Starfire isn't going to consistently hit Nightwing in the back lane, so if you throw in the front lane, she can do okay, but she can't really tank at low stars. There's no point sending your best healer into the front line to just die, just the off chance she gets one ult off to heal Nightwing. So I'm kind of shifting a little bit of how I recommend Starfire, and that was one part of why I consider her trending down, quote-unquote, is this kind of shift towards recommending Batgirl over Starfire for Nightwing purposes. But the other reason for that trending down is just Mythic plus Green Lantern, because Mythic plus Green Lantern is going to challenge her title for best healer in the game. Now I think they're both gonna just, I think, of course, it's hard to tell without Green Lantern being available everywhere, but what it seems like to me is that Starfire will be the best for long-term fights. So stuff like stall comps, stuff like Arkham, stuff like JLD. She's gonna do better in these teams that want to stay alive longer to ramp up. But if you have a team like LOD or like I guess Batfam, I don't know, a team that is more built around ult quick, kill quick, or you lose, you're gonna want Green Lantern because he's gonna get that just kind of instant full team heal. And he's very good at going quick, and you're gonna get a much more it's like instant gratification versus sprint versus marathon. Green Lantern is your sprint healer. He's gonna give you all the healing right up front, and then his value is going to kind of taper off for a little bit until he gets another ult, then it's like, boom, big value. Starfire is like little value stacks on top, medium value stacks on top, high value. Kind of like she needs to ramp up a little bit with the damage reduction stacks, with the attack stacks that she's giving. Green Lantern, all of his value is like up front and then in big bursts. So that's the difference between them, and I think Green Lantern just existing and there being another Mythic Plus healer, because that's in air quotes because Riddler is a healer with his legacy piece, but a character built around being a healer. Starfire was the undisputed best character, then Riddler came around who could also heal, and now Green Lantern's coming around who is also healing at a Mythic Plus stat level. So she has a bit of competition now, so she's gonna kind of trend down. And also, again, as I mentioned briefly, the whole Nightwing Starfire versus Batgirl thing, I think Starfire is still a very strong champion, don't get me wrong, but I think my ability to just flat out recommend her is dropping a tiny bit. Hippo, pretty straightforward. She's, I feel like most people by now know Hippo is just Hippo. Very, very strong protector. One of the best units at keeping your team alive, probably second best after Riddler. Very strong anti-LOD purposes, very good Super Fam 5th, very good LOD 5th. Just works very well being plugged into random teams. She can, even be plugged into Nightwing comps and hit Nightwing consistently. So, very good protector, probably the best character at keeping you alive. I don't need to talk too much about her. And then moving on to Constantine here, this is one of the controversial takes for sure. My biggest issue with Khan is when you compare him to everybody else in this category, Constantine essentially needs to be run with 3 JLD. If you're not running him alongside Swamp and Zatanna, he's going to struggle in late game PvP to find value. And if you run him without Zatanna, you are almost certainly not going to be punching up consistently with him, from what I've seen. I just feel he has kind of lost that plug and play ability in a sense, where it's like every other character on this team, if you have an empty slot and already 4 other characters put in, I'm picking every single one of I could pick any of these characters if I had 4 out of 5 characters on the team and I had 1 empty spot. I'm picking any one of these characters before I pick Constantine. That's my rationale behind moving him down. I think some people would disagree about how he becomes harder to use in late game PvP. I'd probably agree that was probably just kind of wording, being too harsh when I was initially making this graphic, because he's definitely still a top tier DPS. I think he kind of struggles to hold on to top 5, because these two plus Death Metal Batman, just there's a gap, it's Death Metal Batman, Sid, Nightwing. Well, it's Death Metal Batman, gap, Sid, Nightwing, gap, Constantine. That's how the DPS are in my brain. So that's the reason behind Khan potentially moving down. I don't think I'm gonna end up moving him down. Honestly, if I make another graphic like this, hopefully Mythic plus Green Lantern will come down, and then I would move Starfire down, if anything. But we'll see. Oh, and he doesn't require his legacy piece, because you can also use Poison Ivy Dart, obviously. Similar with Sin, and Nightwing can also use T-Spheres, but, you probably should invest in all 3, and if you want to use Khan late game, towards the end game, you definitely need to get his legacy piece really high. But that's the same for, I think, any DPS in this category, is you should be essentially building your account around one of these 3 DPS, and you should be investing in their legacy pieces, for sure. So that's kind of my opinion on my highest value tier. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I don't expect to see a ton of changes next month, but we'll see. Next tier, we have the good value tier. These are going to be characters, like I mentioned earlier, where they're very strong, definitely very strong, but they just have one or another limitation that kind of holds them back. So starting this category off is Superboy. Superboy is one of the best, is the second best universal support. He can also buff healers in combat cycle. So if you have given your Supergirl 3 charges of Superboy ult, you can switch to a healer and they'll start healing more. Um, his legacy piece is the best universal legacy piece in the game. It pretty much is the best support legacy piece in the game. So like if you're building the legacy piece already, you might as well just also build the character because of how good he is. Um, his issue, of course, comes with Superfan being kind of lackluster in PvP. And in PvP not being able to manually control who gets his ult kind of hurts his ability to be run with Titans, because like it should just go to Nightwing most times, but there's always something that could go awry in that process. So I don't love him on Titans. I don't think he was as impactful on there as a lot of people were hoping. Um, but being on Titans is very good for Wally in combat cycle purposes. So, Superboy is definitely propped up a little bit by his legacy piece being so good. And I think also in the universe where we get Mythic plus Flash, Superboy probably moves. He definitely stays in good value in this tier, but he's gonna move down within this tier, if that makes sense. Like he's gonna stay good value, but he's probably gonna move like I'd probably move Joker here. He would probably go before Lobo, but after Freeze in terms of value if Mythic plus Flash comes to all servers the way he is currently. So yeah, that's Superboy. Joker, he lost a little bit. Obviously, before the combat cycle changes, he was definitely up here. But unfortunately, now he is here. I could go on a longer ramble about combat cycle because I think it was a good change, and I'm happy that they made Joker only really good for one day because he genuinely ruined the game mode. I'm sorry to all the people that 5-redded him for combat cycle, but like, I don't know. I don't know. So he lost a little value because he's no longer just the de facto best champion for combat cycle, no longer just brain off, give him 4 supports. Now he has one day he's really good on, and like 1 or 2 days he's like okay on. So he's gonna lose value there more so than other characters, because I like to say CC doesn't matter much for a character's ranking, but Joker was just so dominant in that mode it had to matter. But now with Joker not mattering as much as CC importance for other characters goes up, as you'll see later on. So it was definitely a good change for the sake of balancing. And also there was definitely a universe they could have just completely nerfed Joker for all content and not just CC. So this is definitely best case scenario for how to handle the Joker CC issue. So yeah, he's still very strong in PvP, very strong in multiple team game modes because you can throw him at weaker teams that aren't expecting it. And obviously with Riddler and Freeze, he is a threat and he's a monster in these stall comps that can stay alive long enough for him to ramp up effectively. All right, moving on to Hawkgirl here. She is up here from her previous tier of Uber Skip, worst character in the game. Now she's a very strong plug and play spiritual tank damage, the closest character to being able to consistently tank Death Metal Batman. Very strong, very plug and play friendly because you can kind of just throw her in whatever and she's going to give everyone spiritual defense. So I don't have too much to say about her. I think she's just very good. Like I think there are many reasons to pull on her if you need help against Sins or Jokers or Constantines. She'll provide a lot of value to those teams, and she can kind of just be thrown in whatever, or hybridized really easily with like Bob Batfam, even like Bob JL if you want to get crazy. But like some of those like Mythic plus Batman, Mythic plus Flash, Mythic plus Aquaman kind of come out, there's a universe where Bob JL could be a thing. But she's got potential. She doesn't need to be even on the hybrid team. She can just kind of be thrown in wherever it's an off tank and do pretty good numbers. All right, moving on to Freeze here. Freeze is another new addition. Now, I think people may think I'm undervaluing him. I have him. I think my biggest issue is I just cannot put him on the same tier as Hippo and Swamp Thing because while he does clear at least Hippo in terms no, I wouldn't even say he clears it, but like while he does considerably better than both Hippo and Swamp Thing when it comes to just tanking damage, he is not providing anywhere near the full team impact that like Swamp Thing is, energy draining and debuffing enemies while also giving startup fight damage reduction. Hippo has her ult going off pretty frequently, which is insanely valuable. She has the shield she's throwing. She's able to just mitigate damage for everyone instead of just tanking damage herself. That being said, Freeze is the best character in the game at just tanking damage and surviving. I've seen him the amount of times I've seen him 5v1 comps is just disgusting. He can stall them out with proper legacy piece investment. He definitely needs his legacy piece, and you have to be ready to invest in it to at least blue 5, probably even want purple 5. But his legacy piece is very strong, and it makes him very good at surviving, which he was already very good at without it. So definitely a very strong champion. It also doesn't help that he's only ever run alongside the Riddler rerun, in which case it's more valuable to push your Riddler higher and focus on getting Riddler done first than it is Freeze, because Riddler is just going to, provide more value overall to your account, unless you're specifically trying to run an AMW comp. So yeah, that's where Freeze, that's the rundown on Freeze. Moving on to Lobo here. He's going to be our first one showing off how the T-Sphere icon looks. Lobo got bumped up because of the new CC changes. He's one of the characters, because now that Lobo was always very good at CC, but it was that issue of Joker is so good, it doesn't matter how good other characters are on like 2 or 3 days, because Joker just does everything. But now that Joker isn't doing everything, Lobo really gets to shine because he's so good at just being literally plugged into whatever and doing very strong damage, for sure. He's not the best single target physical damage dealer. I'll talk about it a little more when we get to Wally later on, but him and Wally are going to be essentially fighting for the same niche in your roster of physical single target. The thing that bumps Lobo higher for me is Lobo is way better in PvP, and B, Lobo is more consistently good, whereas Wally Wally's easily the best at the Drowned. He's really good at the 2 or 3 other single target physical days, and then he's terrible every other day. Lobo is Lobo can do work on the AoE days too, whereas Wally is entirely single target, so he can't. Lobo's ult can hit multiple people, so he can still do things on the AoE days. And he just has way more value in PvP because he's actually kind of a soft counter to Riddler, Swamp, Freeze, Starfire, these healers and the self-healers of PvP purposes. That being said, though, he is going to be our first heavy investment, quote-unquote, character. I think it's generally just a safe rule of thumb going forward that for the most part, any firepower or assassin, just assume they're gonna be labeled high investment. And that's gonna be purple. If realistically it's yellow 1 and higher, but if I want to be, I guess fair, it's purple 3 or higher, but you should be shooting for yellow 1 and higher on a lot of these characters, because they just really need those extra stats because they're so squishy at low stars, and they're not able to do enough damage quick enough to warrant just, falling over from a random cyborg first skill that just nukes them for no reason. So yeah, Lobo also joins the most firepower as an assassin. His legacy piece is really mid until you can invest in it. I'm talking even purple stars for Lobo. I think Lobo and Wally are especially you need to get their legacy pieces really high for it to be worth. Some of the other ones who I'll mention, Red Hood, I don't think you need to get. You can probably get away with a purple star legacy piece because the unique skill it's applying is valuable enough that it'll matter a little more, or it'll matter, the difference will matter a little less. It's just Lobo and Wally have very mediocre exclusive skills that aren't gonna suddenly bring them back or save them from mediocrity, without investment, of course. So yeah, Lobo is gonna round off this tier of these are just champions that are very good, but I would make sure you have, who you need or who you want to build from this tier done first before, or not, maybe not done, but accounted for in your summoning plans before you consider looking at these guys and figuring out which of these guys you want to take up. All right, moving on. We're going to move out of the, I would recommend these characters to 90% of the community, and we're moving on to a little more niche use case characters. Starting with Supergirl, I think she is just the de facto best CC unit in the game now. She nukes all AoE. She nukes all physical damage weak bosses. Like, she's doing too much, genuinely. That being said, she needs investment to do that. She's an oddity because you also want to get her probably to Yellow 1 for CC purposes. You're also going to want, ideally, a high star Crypto, which is pretty easy, to be fair. But you're also going to you need Superboy. One thing I kind of have been seeing in, like, the early 430s who are getting Red Hood, for some reason they're getting Red Hood early. I don't know, bleed calendar things. If you even look at the history of the tier list that I've put out, when Supergirl first launched, she was like an A, or like, no, she's like a B tier champion. The second she got Crypto and Superboy, she shot up to S tier, and she stayed there for months. So, like, she really needs the two super fam supports, or she is, like, gonna be putting out really mediocre numbers. I've seen people being like, oh, Red Hood's the best AoE CC champion, but it's like, you're comparing a Supergirl at, like, genuinely, like, 20% of her, like, a quarter of her power, Like, the people who have Red Hood, other than Beta, the people in the 400s who have Red Hood right now don't have Superboy. They just have a Supergirl without a Superboy, and that's a substantially weaker Superboy, Or, sorry, a substantially weaker Supergirl, and not at all a Supergirl at her peak of damage. So moving on from Supergirl here, we're going to talk about Cass. Cass is an interesting case because I think a lot of people rate her really highly, but that's because a lot of free-to-plays and, like, really, like, kind of casual players invest a lot in Batfam, and when you plug her into Batfam and you give her that Batfam passive, you give her her legacy piece, she's a really, really good tank when it comes to physical damage comps. The issue is for the min-max, or for the higher tier, like, mid spenders that are just below, like, whale territory, she is not gonna suddenly make your Batfam able to punch up against the Death Metal Batmans and the Sinestros of the world. She's just not gonna do that. And she also, Merciless, and I believe there's one more day. Cass is, like, absurdly strong and a very good CC unit, which definitely helps her a little bit. I would say her legacy piece is required because you can throw, like, Dupe Mirror on her, but, like, dodging doesn't do anything for her other than just, dodging. Until you get the legacy piece, and then when you get the legacy piece, you get healed every time you dodge, so, like, way better. And then she should be way better at, like, she's chain dodging, like, Death Metal Wonder Woman's chain lightning, and healing every time she dodges it, so she very easily can become an insane frontliner. The problem is physical damage is very off meta in PvP, so unless you're just trying to snipe a random, like, someone using super fam for whatever reason still in 3v3, she's just not going to be super, super valuable for your account overall. But she can definitely carry you through Merciless, and that whatever one other day that she's very strong in is for a combat cycle. So that helps her, that saves her a little bit, for sure, when it came to making this list. Moving on to Artemis here, we have a similar issue to Cass, where she's very, very strong into those physical damage comps, but the second you throw her against a Sinestro or, like, a Batman, she's just going to get deleted. I don't know what they were smoking when they put a character as, like, when they gave a character increased spiritual damage taken in 2026. Like, every Sin was at the top. Sinestro was far and away the best DPS in the game until Batman dropped, and now Batman is far and away the best DPS in the game. So it's like, you've always had a physical dealer at the top, and I mean, even if you didn't have, even if Batman doesn't exist, the majority of the top 5 DPS are spiritual because you have Joker and you have Constantine, who are also spiritual. Like making a character take increased spiritual damage when 90% of the top meta is spiritual is kind of asinine to me. I don't know why they ever thought that, like, Amazons would kind of do anything. But, I mean, Amazons definitely have the ability to farm in, like, low masters or mid masters, depending on your, server activity and cluster spending levels. So like there's definitely times when she can pop off, but like for the average player, you're not gonna get, like, for the player like trying to punch up and trying to push higher against certain whale comps, you're not gonna just find that value out of Artemis. That being said, if you really like her and you want to invest in her, I think you can definitely do things with her. And that Amazon Titans hybrid with Nightwing and Starfire is actually surprisingly strong. Um, but you're just not, you're still going to struggle against the Sins and the Batmans and the Constantines, which are just everywhere. So that's going to always hold her back. MMH is kind of here for a similar reason. He is very weak against physical damage and assassins, we've noticed, since his rework. But he's definitely a more consistent Constantine counter with his rework. He really wants that 3JL, 3 Outsiders triggered, but it's just so hard to do because there's one really good... So, like, there's one really good JL unit in Hawkgirl. The rest of that team is mid. There's one really good Outsiders unit in Starfire, and the other Outsiders unit is Arsenal, and I don't ever see them ever making another Outsiders ever because they're just panicking with that team, and when it was like a really simple fix, and they kind of just made it worse. So, unfortunately, I think we're going to kind of be stuck here until some of these JL characters get their Mythic Plus Ascension. Then I think MMH might actually have some decent use cases alongside new Flash and new Aquaman for sure. I would keep an eye on. I don't think new Batman is going to matter at all, which we'll talk about later. But, with new JL units getting added, I think there's a chance that MMH definitely finds a little bit more of a use case, but I really don't see him ever leaving situational, especially because nowadays they nerfed his self-healing, and you really need to be running him with as many supports as possible, or he is just gonna kind of explode, for sure. So, yeah, that's gonna do it for situational value. I think these are all characters where they have certain scenarios where they can be very strong and are arguably, like, the best at a certain thing in the game. Like, Supergirl's best CC champion, Cass is best physical damage nullifier in the game. Artemis is really, really good at, taking those one-on-ones and winning them and isolating frontliners and assassins especially. And MMH is a very good plug-in spiritual off-tank and a very good constant and the best Constantine counter in the game. But, those are kind of like niche use cases where I don't think the average player should, the average free-to-play should be investing in them and expect them to fully perform as, as in those niches that I described, because if you want them to do that, you have to kind of build around them instead of kind of, throwing them in places and they're just gonna, Cass is the best physical damage counter in the game because I just threw into this random comp. Like, no, you have to build around her. You have to, understand what she wants to do and kind of hold their hands through what they need to do. So that's the explanation on that tier. We're going to move on to the next one here. Okay, moving on to the luxury bleed tier. We have 4 characters who are kind of all the same in terms of what they are doing and what they're bringing to the table. We're going to start with the Red Hood Night Fight here, who is the newest bleed champion unit, and honestly, who I may even move further down in this tier next month. We'll kind of see as more testing comes in, especially once global players get their hands on him in 2 months, because they have to go through Lobo first. So yeah, it should be like another month before we see anything about him in global. But from the limited testing I've done so far, and from a little bit of the stuff I've seen in 434, honestly, I think he might even just fall in flat out skip tier. The only use case you have, there's 2 reasons I would ever recommend building Red Hood. One, you just really, really like him and you think he's cool, which is totally fair. That's why I built him. 2, if for whatever reason you have a personal vendetta against Supergirl and you never ever plan on building Supergirl and Superboy for anything, and you want just the super budget option, that's him. He's the budget AoE physical damage dealer who just gets outclassed by Supergirl with a Superboy and everything. I kind of held out hope that he might be the best character for Dawnbreaker, the way Wally's the de facto best character for Drowned because Red Hood wants to he deals more damage if the more HP the enemy has. The Dawnbreaker minions have a shit ton of HP. He's not proven me right so far. And Supergirl with Superboy, Crypto Flash is still just doing like tenfold his damage. Like I think if I pulled up the beta CC scoreboard from the Merciless day where Batfam is boosted, so you'd expect him to be good. There was like a 20 million gap between the top 5 was all Supergirl, and then 6th place was a Supergirl and Red Hood person, and there was still like a 200 million gap, or 20 million, I don't remember if it's 200 or 20 million. There's a considerable gap between the last top tier Supergirl team and the first Red Hood team. So unfortunately, I think he's just kind of mid and may very well just end up in skip tier. But I think the use case of I don't want to invest in Superfam at all is enough of a use case to prop him up. So he might kind of just move down to the very bottom of this tier and will kind of shift appropriately. But yeah, him and Wally are similar to Lobo. Their legacy piece is pretty mediocre without investment, and you're better off with just a higher invested T-Sphere for sure. All right, and we've mentioned him a lot, but speaking of Wally, Wally is essentially the single target version of Red Hood, and kind of how Red Hood is to Supergirl, Wally is to Lobo, except there's a much smaller gap between Wally and Lobo because Supergirl is just way better, and while Wally is way better for PvE than Lobo is way better for PvP and more consistent in PvE. So yeah, Wally is definitely the de facto best character for the Drowned. He's very strong against both Red Death and against Killer Tank, but he's pretty much useless everywhere else for the rest of CC. And he's useless in high tier PvP. I know there's so many people who every time I dare say Wally is not the best in PvP. People like to mention how they can make it work, but like you can make any character work, and I think bricking your account to make Wally work in PvP is just not worth it. But yes, he is the best for Drowned. He is probably the second or maybe even the best for Killer Tank. I just think Lobo is going to bring more to the other physical weakdays who like Merciless and Dawnbreaker who are AoE. Wally is really not going to do much, and he just takes way too much damage from the summons from Dawnbreaker and Merciless to really be worth running. So I think he's got his niche now, which is good because he really needed it. So now there is a reason, I think, to pull Wally 100%. I just still think he is going to fall into those, I have extra resources, and I really, really need somebody to... I really struggle on Drowned and Killer Tank, and I need a character who I can use to push myself higher. And I don't mind wasting resources on him for a relatively niche thing, and he's not going to do much else in my roster. That's kind of the mentality of this whole category, is you have to go in and accept the fact that these characters have their job and they're not really going to do much outside of that. Moving on to the last two characters in this tier, we have the two opposites. Raish and Deathstroke are both very strong in PvP and pretty weak in PvE. That being said, Deathstroke I think is better in PvE with the new CC changes. He's a pretty solid option for a lot of the days. Wally's good, he's okay. He's pretty good, which definitely helps his the many Deathstroke copers out there who think he is still good. In PvP, he genuinely, I was talking with Toki earlier today. The only character that is released this year and who hasn't countered Deathstroke in some way is Wally. Genuinely, every other character that is released in 2026 has had a way to deal with Deathstroke, or to like either shut him down and install him out, or just completely just blow him up immediately. Every other character has a way to deal with him in 2026 other than Wally. So just a funny little side tangent there. Raish is a character that I know not many people have seen. He's only ever been out in beta, which is 5 servers total that have now been merged into just 2. He is much better in PvP than Raish, in my opinion, because with investment you can basically just get a free kill on a backliner if they're not using like a hippo or a swamp, or I think you can definitely kill through a swamp with some delaying ult charge rates and some just min-maxing. that a lot of people won't do. But I think Raish will be a very interesting character when he comes out, because I think a lot of those the guys who like to punch up and the like the lower tier whales who, you know, like think very deeply about min-maxing energy gain and comps and stuff. He's really fun because you can kind of just position him to take out a backliner of your choice. Now, granted, that's a lot harder to do with all the protectors in the game, but I still think there will be people will find a way to make it be done. I think Raish will kind of surprise people when he drops, because everyone's like, oh, the Outghouls suck, and I think Talia definitely does suck, but I don't think Raish sucks. I think Raish is just kind of not great, and also it's horrible for PvE, one of the worst PvE champions in the game. But his PvP presence is definitely there, and I think will kind of be a bit of a shock to some people. Not all, definitely, but some people will be kind of surprised by what he can do. So yeah, these are going to be characters, like I said, they're doing their one job, and they're really not doing a ton outside of it, and you should only really be investing in these if you have extra anvils to spend. Alright. Last year for the official, quote-unquote, rankings from me, we have the skip tier. Now, you know, I think all these characters have a universe where they're usable, and if you invest in them, they can do something. They're just not good. They're not good. They're not, you know, I think the average player would just be way better off not even spending a single anvil on their banner. But yeah, I think these are probably easily the three worst bleeds in the game. Soon to be joined by a fourth, who I will mention in the next slide. But yeah, let's just go into it. Talia here, just she's high investment for a budget Supergirl, and if you want a budget Supergirl, now you have Red Hood Night Fight, so she kind of lost her only niche of being that AoE dealer. And if you want an AoE assassin, Deathstroke is probably just good enough. Or why would you want an AoE assassin when you can just pick Raish, who is a free one-shot single-target assassin, or Nightwing, who's a chain-target assassin? Just pick Nightwing. Every other assassin kind of mid. She's just bad. She might find some extra random niche use case if she ever drops in global on Dawnbreaker and Merciless days, because she definitely can do damage with support. But she's not gonna contest the Supergirls, not even close, and I would be shocked if she contests the Red Hoods on those days. She's probably gonna be similar more to like Mythic Red Hood. So like, if you have nothing else and you really like her, I mean, you can. There's your excuse for summoning on her. But I think that's just such a small percent of the player base who is not gonna have Supergirl and not gonna have Red Hood Night Fight, and is only using like base Red Hood for AoE physical days. Like, you know, so I just think the average player is just not gonna find value out of her, and she really needs her legacy piece, because not having super armor on that ultimate, she just gets like a light breeze will cancel her ultimate, or just send her like to the other side of the map and her ult does nothing. So she definitely needs her legacy piece for that exclusive skill. Superman, I think it's kind of inevitable, you know, first bleed in the game ever, like a 2-year-old kit at the least. He sucks. He's bad. He's not good. He's a dead weight on Super Fam. He's like on Justice League. He can kind of do some stuff early game carrying, obviously, but the second, like, he's not the only bleed, he just immediately just like plummets off a cliff. You need to be able to invest the 1k eyes needed to get his solar recovery suit, and then good job, he's okay. Like, good job, he's maybe not the worst character on your roster anymore, maybe. So, like, I don't know. He's in such a bad spot right now. He needs a ton. He just needs, like, he needs so much. He needs base crit rate. He needs more defense. He needs more HP. He needs somebody to self-heal. Like, he is a mess right now. He needs a lot of help to be to the point where I would ever recommend summoning on him. And also his niche of just high single target physical damage has been filled by so many other characters, just not really needed. So, hopefully they can figure something out with him. I think there's also just a universe where they just don't, because we've seen them try to do it with Batman now, and this is the, like, 5th time they've failed at making Batman usable. So, I think Superman fans are going to have to settle for getting a second legacy piece, and then just wait for Death Metal Superman in, like, fall, and spend all your money on him. Unfortunate. Last one in this tier, Scarecrow. I mean, we all know, if you've been around in the community for a while, Scarecrow was like a think Mr. Freeze if he provided that team-wide utility that I rag on Freeze for not having. And all they needed to do to this guy was move his stun to his legacy piece, and they did that, and then just got rid of the rest of his kit for genuinely no reason, and now he just sucks. If you're building AMW and you want to run pure AMW as a free-to-play, you should absolutely be summoning on Joker and Riddler before you even look at Freeze. And then when you look at Freeze, you get your Freeze max. You probably have your Bane at like red stars because he's featured on these banners. And if you're focusing AMW, you're using your selector tokens on Bane and on Two-Face. You have like no reason to summon for this guy, and you're better off just building a second team. Then you like it's kind of insane that you're better off just dealing with like a Bane being like kind of mid than spending resources on Scarecrow, because if you do that and you need to get value out of him, you gotta invest in his legacy piece so he gets that stun back. And I mean, like, he's good in LOD where you can, if you have that high star legacy piece and you can get him to get that stun off. Like, the reason LOD was so dominant for so long is because you could instant ult with Scarecrow, he would stun the entire team, and then in that second they were stunned, you know, Deathstroke and Sin would just one-shot everyone, you know? They can't do anything because Scarecrow is frame one stunning them. That was garbage. That had to be taken out. Because it was just unhealthy for the game's meta, but they did like so much else that was so unnecessary to the character, and they killed him. And I just don't think there's any universe, unless you really like Scarecrow or you really want to run LOD as a whale, that you should be pulling on this character. I think they've just kind of ruined him, and he's gotten to the point where I just can't in good faith recommend people spending anvils on him. So yeah, I think the skips are straightforward. They're all just bad. They all just get outclassed. They all just don't bring enough to the table to just be worth summoning on. But again, like everything in this game, I think I gave every one of them at least. Well, I didn't really give Superman one, but I think Talia and there's like 5% of the community, 2% of the community, where it's like there's an excuse for you to summon on these characters. And if that's what you really want to do it. I'm not. You know, I'm here to tell the people who really care about getting the maximum return on invest in these characters, and like I don't want you wasting anvils on these characters that you have to dump 2,000 eyes into for them to be usable. So, you know, that's the bulk of the list done. I don't want to confuse the people who are in basically any server before 445, because the next two characters I'm going to talk about are the two reworked, the Mythic to Mythic Plus characters who are available through the Bleed. Not every Mythic Plus version of the Mythic Justice League characters are Bleed units. Some of them are just, you know, attained through other ways, which I don't need to go into. But these two are so far only available to 446 to 448, and so far the only information we have about them coming to later servers is that it'll work like the Legendary to Mythic Ascension. So like these guys might even not need to be on this you know, skip or summon, whatever you want to call this type of infographic, because, you know, the majority of the community won't have a Batman or a Flash Bleed per se, but but it's still, I think, a good read on where I personally think these characters will land when they release to everyone else, which hopefully they do. So yeah, long ramble out of the way. If you're just here for the characters that we know for sure everyone will eventually get access to, that's the end of that. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you, of course, disagree. But yeah, moving on here. We'll bang out this last little section with our two 446 to 448 exclusives at the current moment. Mythic Plus Flash, I genuinely really want to get my hands on. I think he will dethrone Superboy. For obviously, of course, you know, Superboy with a Supergirl is a different story. But in terms of just universal account value, I think Flash will beat Superboy, and I think there will be certain cases where he'll even beat out Zatanna, because one thing he has over Zatanna is Zatanna can't actually buff your healers because she's only buffing damage dealt. Flash just gives the whole team passive attack for existing. He's insane. He's going to be very good at buffing supports, or buffing healers, I should say. His legacy piece is very strong. He increases ult damage of anyone he hits with his ult. He is giving them attack based on his attack, and he's just gonna become an absolute demon, I think. You're gonna see him basically every day of CC. You're gonna probably start seeing him in PvP too, because they got rid of his stupid gimmicky like dodge bonus. Like I think this character is gonna be an insanely valuable unit that basically, assuming he's quote unquote free to get for people who have, I would assume, Mythic Red. 5 red Mythic Flash, and then you upgrade him to Mythic Plus. Everyone, I think, should. Flash is usable at red 5, but I think if I really think pushing him to red 5 now, with the assumption that that is how you'll get him to Mythic Plus, is a good like decision that most people should be doing, because I think if that is a free Mythic Plus Flash everyone is getting, like, this is insane, like, free, quote unquote, but you know what I mean. Like, if it's the same way like the Legendary Ascensions were, and you're getting a free Mythic Plus unit by ascending your Mythic unit, this Flash character is going to be insane. He's probably going to be jumping up to S tier, S plus. He's absolute minimum S tier. He might even go to S plus tier just because of everyone just gets him for having Mythic Flash at 5 red, which is like one of the few grindable, like consistently grindable shards in the game through League Shop. Everyone is just going to get like a beast of a support unit that is really strong. So I look forward to seeing him come to later servers, and I think people should also look forward to him because I think he's going to be a monster. Definitely a demon. And then on the complete other side of the spectrum, we have Batman. This guy, I don't know what I guess they think his kit is good enough after the 3rd or 4th like entire kit refresh he's gotten. He is just not. Like, they gave him the most like, I don't understand the idea behind the legacy piece. It's literally like he gets dodge per crit rate. Like, who, like, why do we have like this is he's now like the 4th tank who is just frontlining, like, you have Catwoman, you have Red Robin, you have Cass, and now you have new Batman. These are just weird frontliners that are meant to dodge, but physical damage is just not a thing. It's not a relevant damage source. So, like, he just kind of sucks because, like, you have to invest all this crit rate for, like, dodge. Whoop-de-doo. Half the time, he just drops aggro anyways with his first skill. He's just gonna, like, disappear, and whoever's behind him is just gonna get instantly one-shot by the Sinestro that's gonna randomly just change targets because Batman's dropping aggro. Like, I don't understand. And the legacy piece exclusive skill, all they could think to do, just make him alt again, but it does slightly less damage. Like, what? Like, and this character now has he no longer, like, you used to be able to throw his ult in the back line, and it was great for, like, Justice League Realm of Fate, because you could take out those Ivy plants that, like, nobody else in Justice League could deal with. Now you have to be in, like, Superman ult range to hit Batman ult. Like, I don't understand. It just baffles me why they just can't get this character right. And I just don't think anyone, like, I think the problem we're gonna run into is a similar issue with Mythic Plus Flash, where these people in these servers are gonna get their hands on their first Mythic Plus rarity AoE DPS, and they're like, oh my god, he's insane, like, look at all his damage he's doing. But, like, the second you get you get Sinestro, boom, he's one shot, or he's just letting his team get one shot. You get Hippo, boom, his entire ult is useless. You get Riddler, boom, his entire ult is useless. You get Swamp Thing, boom, his entire kit is useless because he can't dodge Swamp Thing and he's never getting his ult off, so he's just dropping the aggro, or dropping aggro and randomly, like, he's not good, and they failed at reworking him again and making him relevant again. He goes up to like 80, like he is just AoE Superman now. That's all he is. He's maybe slightly better than Superman in damage, but he's slightly worse than Superman at max investment at tanking, because he's just dropping aggro. Like, I don't. Why do you make a frontliner who drops aggro, and why do you make a frontliner who's revolved around a damage type that hasn't been in the meta since like the first month of the game? I don't know. Weird things. Unfortunately, not enough to save Batman, and that's just gonna land him in a skip. I mean, maybe there's a world where he lands up in Luxury Bleed because he might just be better than Red Hood at doing AoE damage, but I really, really don't see him leaving the skip tier. So yeah, kind of more of a rant ending off the video, because, you know, kind of stupid that they keep messing up the most iconic character in arguably comic book history. But that's where we are. I think Flash will be insane, so at least we'll take one win. You know, we'll take our win. We'll take our win. But yeah, I think Batman and both Aquaman too, they're gonna feel really strong early on as we start seeing stuff coming out of those early servers, and then they're just gonna, you know, right up a cliff, or like if they drop in later servers, like nobody's gonna. I mean, not like anyone has Batman at 5 red anyways, because he's like a pseudo paywall champion. I don't know. A lot of questionable decisions from them on Batman. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it here for me. I don't want to keep you guys hostage with my rants about Batman being mid. But, yeah. So, that's going to sum it up. I hope you guys found this at least a little bit more informative and a little bit more maybe my decisions make a little more sense now. I'm sorry this video is kind of long. I had a lot of thoughts. This is a very, it's a topic I have like over like close to 2 years worth of input, kind of, and 2 years worth of data, and seeing these characters go up, go down, shift around on tier lists, especially as somebody who makes tier lists or made tier lists for a long time. Yeah, so that's gonna do it for me. I hope this video was semi-informative, and of course I'm open to feedback. I am just one person who I'm young, I make mistakes, and that happens, and I would love to hear if you guys have any opinions. And yeah, let me know down below if this was informative, and if you like me making videos explaining these graphics a little more in depth, because it was pretty fun to make, and I definitely would do more if there's demand. So yeah, all right, that's gonna do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you guys later.